University of Oviedo and the director of the sustainability chair of the university for the record time organization of the second UNWTO World Conference on Smart Destinations. I would also like to thank all the experts who've submitted their very high-quality papers, and also those of you who are here with us today to talk about a topic which is very much across the board, and it's very complex, and because of that, only a win-win situation can favor all the stakeholders involved, including also local residents who can't be the losers in an ecosystem where everybody else wins. Tourism is undergoing a digital transformation, just like all of us in the 21st century, as Natalia knows very well, where internal efficiency and competitiveness are first and foremost, and also the hyper-connected tourist. Manuel, you know about that. People don't want to be canned in an analog environment. So platforms, all sorts of platforms, and are changing. Also, business models are changing. There are disruptors. And at the start of the internet, we thought the internet was going to directly put in touch consumers and producers, but that's not the case. New middle people have arisen. Platforms, for instance, trying to improve tourist destinations with clusters, SMEs, entrepreneurs, academia, all of us doing our best to try and improve the situation in tourism. During the day today, different sessions have been talking about circular economy, sustainability, accessibility, access to data, innovation, and technology that's everywhere, and a technology that should never be an end, but a means to an end. We have to be able to measure tourism if we want to manage it or improve it. How can we improve something we can't measure? And for smart tourist destinations, we need high-quality data, real time, if possible, because tourist intelligence means that real-time informed decisions need to be made. So data have to be used in a responsible manner as well, respecting privacy, that is, tourists who generate the digital footprint. Data need to be anonymized as well. But we need data so we can measure and see if particular destinations are saturated, or if we want to be proactive in chemistry. In a solution, we can calculate the saturation point where substances do not dissolve but precipitate. Well, finding that point in tourism is important for decisions. And here, the circumstances are not the temperature of solvent, but others. Tourism is a catalyst for peace and peaceful coexistence. I honestly think that if innovation and technology are basic currently in tourism, that will be even more the case in the future. But academia is here to help us, which is why I want to particularly thank and congratulate all participants. I've thoroughly enjoyed what I've heard, but we need to still listen to all the rest, which are being streamed, and we will do so at Seguitor. Thank you very much for your attention.
Natalia, you're going to address us next. You're the senior expert. Does that mean UNWTO has lots of other experts underneath you? Yes, of course. Or are you the only expert? No. Oh, wonderful. Okay, Natalia.
Muy buenas tardes a todos.
Good evening, everyone. And I want to particularly thank Fernando on behalf of the WTO and on behalf of our Secretary General. I also want to thank Isabel and Dirk from the UNWTO. It has to be said that the UNWTO has only had an innovation and digital transformation area for a very short time, logically so. But not so long ago, a UN agency that specializes in tourism did not have to know so much about digital matters, but now it is definitely one of our priorities, and that's why I'm here. Just a few months ago, we were working with the General Secretary to design our strategy in a more proactive manner so that our member states can work for a more sustainable tourism that is truly digital and very close to new technologies. And we found Maria Benumea, who used to be my boss, by the way, because before working for the UNWTO, I was vice president of South Summit, and that was a great experience. I learned so much here in Europe to be able to contribute it later in Latin America, and that was my inspiration for my current role. I'm truly convinced that entrepreneurship is basic, and our strategy is helping member states to design and promote and scale up entrepreneurial and innovation systems. And talking to Fernando a little while ago, we don't just talk about data or information. We need to connect all of that as well to startups, to businesses, to public institutions, to central governments, to academia, and logically academia as well. And this is what the UNWTO World Conference is doing, and in a country no other but Spain. And here we have some Latin American colleagues who know perfectly well about what Spain has done. Why? Because Spain has been very generous in disseminating that knowledge. So looking at you here, I remember Maria when she started the South Summit saying that we need to reinforce the entrepreneurial system and ecosystem in Spain focused on tourism, which is true, but also at the UNWTO we think that we need to connect all of that with other countries. We need to talk to investors. We need to talk to the main tourist corporations, larger companies, so that they can have programs with startups. We're working on that at the UNWTO. After listening to Maria's presentation, I was listening to the first part of the meeting of the papers here in room 1. They were talking about new technologies and how they help in decision making. And I was laughing to myself because that's the second step in our strategy. Brilliant. As I said, UNWTO is now obsessed in helping member states to do better with their ecosystems, which logically is very, very different the situation in Colombia, for instance, my country, we hardly have anything. So comparing Colombia with Spain or with Japan or with France is very different. They're at different points of their ecosystem. And I totally agree with Fernando. Innovation has to go hand in hand with digital transformation. UNWTO says that we need to then work on new technologies and smart destinations. And I would like to explain to you that when we talk about digital transformation, we mean helping member states, and I'm going to say that in English, if I may.
with smart data. ¿Cómo podemos tomar decisiones inteligentes si queremos?
That is, if we want to make high-quality public policies, we need to be close to the private sector as well. We need to set up innovative workshops where we can learn how to work with data in an intelligent, smart manner. Those of you who work for a public institution, how do you make your decision where to invest your funds? Which trade exhibition to go to? Well, because you have information, because you have data, and you can make smart decisions. So maybe many of the players that we can see. Let's look at that. Amadeus, they work with UNWTO. Telefonica works with UNWTO, and we're working very, very hard to organize workshops so we can teach the leaders in member states to make informed decisions, talking about funding and infrastructures and so on. One of the presentations I listened to today said we need to help private companies make good decisions. And in their study, they found that businesses and companies often don't use information, even though they know information and data is basic. Why? Because they don't know how to manage them, how to use them. Well, very often governments, central states, have that very problem. They don't know how to use data they already have. Something else I've written down in my notes listening to one of the presentations today was that one of the main mistakes that companies make is they don't mind the gap when it comes to managing expectations. What that means is that they promise something, they create expectations in potential tourists. Then when tourists get to their destinations, they feel disappointed. Logically, if they had access to information, knowing exactly what type of tourists come at which time of year, if it's religious tourism or families or what it is, then they would be able to organize their offer, their supply much better. Because if they don't know, they tend to have a very general supply, very general products, not adapted to a particular type of tourist, and tourists are disappointed. We need to make that effort. Something else I've made a note of listening to a presentation today was talking about tourist-friendly experiences. For instance, is augmented reality a good idea? Well, there was a very, very interesting presentation here about augmented reality in rural tourism. And it was great. For instance, augmented reality goggles, where you can visit your rural destination and see fantastic things. That's great, right? Being able to see things that normally we can't. That technology has not just very high expectations, but also very high quality realities, using technology in a very well differentiated manner with rural destinations having that added value compared to other destinations. Another note I made today was the decision-making process connected with sustainability. there was a presentation about the Brazilian case, where we were told how the Brazilian government has been helping startups, how the entrepreneurial ecosystem is promoted, and where a micro-segmentation is still required, together with support, financial support, and funding for entrepreneurs. Let me finish and tell you that in my trips with the Secretary General, it's amazing. Last time, I think it was 12 flights in 10 days in 3 different continents. Imagine that. And in those 3 continents, 100% of the governments told us the same thing. They said, okay, yes, we need technology, we need to know how to use it, but also we need to be able to use data combined with powerful entrepreneurs, so that tourism is part of the global agenda of innovation. Because when we go to big conferences of innovation and technology, nobody much seems to talk about tourism. That's a challenge, right? That we need to improve as a team. Not forgetting that tourism is one of the main industries globally, with a huge number of jobs, and those jobs in the future will be very, very technological. The MasterCard president told me today in the ministries they should have data scientists, right? And what about tourism? Well, the new jobs in the future with added value will be technological, but they should also be humane, right? Let's make that effort. In tourism, technology is not going to do away with jobs, it's going to generate new jobs. So we're just now seeing the tip of the iceberg this evening, afternoon and evening here today. We still have 2 fantastic days to come to make tourism more sustainable, and so that it's at the heart of the innovation agenda worldwide. Thank you very much for your attention.
Right.
At all?
Not at all. Well, here's the complicated. I have to tell you something.
Okay.
That in the trade, the shift they have given you here, miners have shifts, you have shift, yeah? Mm-hmm. We call it the graveyard shift.
Uh-huh.
That's the last one of the day when they all want to go and watch football.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and they're thinking, cider, oh, good.
Okay,
you know?
okay.
But you have the best thing of the day, sir, because you have to talk about the most beautiful, beautiful part of Spain. And so I hope you do.
You're a liar. You're a liar.
No, you need to send us off into the night to enjoy your beautiful Principality.
Okay, thank you very much. Bien, buenas tardes a todos.
Good evening, everyone. I made a special effort when preparing my presentation, making my speech particularly short for those who are really, really passionate about football. But after what the chairman told me now, I'm going to be particularly brief. Good evening, everyone. As Fernando said, one of my responsibilities is talking about telecommunications and industrial matters. And we're meeting at a house in a region where our past was the iron and steel industry and mining. And yet, right now, those values and traditions and history, fortunately, has been turned into a tourist attraction as well. As I said, I have a very, very brief presentation, but I would also like to thank the organizers for thinking of this small Spanish region as the venue for your conference, because Asturias is often not the best known region for tourists, and yet we have so much to offer. I hope for those of you who are not familiar with our homeland, I hope you enjoy your stay. We're about to finish this first day of the meeting for the second UNWTO World Conference on Smart Destinations. On behalf of the regional government of Asturias, I would like to tell you a little bit about how connectivity is crucial for the development of any territory. Any smart destination management needs competitive connectivity. Why? Well, let me give you some facts and figures. The Principality of Asturias is the European region with a most complex geography for the population we have. For instance, the Alps. Well, they have higher mountains, but lower population density. Let me just give you an idea. Some 10,000 square meters in our region, with about 500,000 inhabitants, most of them living in the central part of the region, which would account for some 25% of our geography. So some 3/4 of our population living in 25% of the territory. Then both the east and the west of the region, mostly inland, are very sparsely populated, with a very aged population in a very mountainous, very remote areas. Because of that, our population particularly need access to telecommunications, and yet telephony providers and internet providers complain that their return on investment in those regions would be too poor. So what have we done as public institution in our region? Well, we know that those particular areas that I've mentioned are natural paradises. They're fantastic destinations, and yet they were very, very poor from the point of view of connectivity. As a result of that, we have fiber optics, neutral fiber optic network reaching to those areas. All of that started in 2007, and that was the first case in Europe where that was done as a result of a public institution, with some 9,000 serviceable points serving 30 different councils in our region. You might already know, but let me just give you a few facts and figures of what tourism means for our region. 2.5 million visitors in 2017. They spent some 8% more than the previous year. That accounts for some 10% of GDP in our region and some 12% of total jobs in the region. Logically, having a competitiveness for tourist destinations and tourism businesses, that had to be a priority for the regional government of the Principality of Asturias. It was not an easy task, quite simply because of the reasons I gave you earlier on. We are making a huge effort in investment and resources, also to map all the different supply in tourism, new stakeholders, so that we can have good connectivity at all times. The 2020 strategy wanted to eliminate white areas in the European Union, that is, areas that have no internet access of at least 30 megabits per second broadband. The European Union set that target to eliminate all white areas in the European Union. And because of that, the Asturcon network is a basic tool for telecommunications to get to areas that would otherwise would not be served. We now have 10 gigabits served at the moment for 10,000 points. That's what we've done in the last 3 years, and even in some villages with under 20 users. And I did say 20, by the way. Yes. For instance, when you talk to representatives from other regions and they talk about white areas of under 10,000 inhabitants, they just stare at me in amazement when I say that we did that a long time ago and we are now just solving tiny white dots in villages with under 10 users. So we're talking about better management of smart tourist destinations, improving competitiveness, which is particularly important for a region like ours, with complex geography, with areas that are sparsely populated. How can we do it? Well, we need to have public-private partnership. The European Union, public institutions in Spain and in Asturias, all of us are making that effort, but there's an absolute need to have PPPs, public-private partnerships, that make all the sense in this field. Well, let me remind you, just to finish my presentation, for those of you who want to suffer with the Spanish team, let me remind you that it's thanks to new technologies and to us that you'll be watching it today. And once again, I would like to thank and congratulate the organizers for this session. As I said, it's a great honor to have you here and to use us as your venue. Thank you.
And I think may we have a round of applause for our 3 speakers, but particularly a round of applause for Asturias.
You're very welcome.
Just in closing, please be ready to go. Tomorrow morning at 9:30, may we please, you've been so good on time today. 9:30 tomorrow morning, we have some very important, and they're interesting as well as being very important. Because we welcome the new Minister of Tourism from Madrid, for Spain, I think making her first public speech about tourism. So if we can start, please, at 9:30 tomorrow morning, and enjoy your evening in this beautiful city.